So if we have not met, I am Brittany Parker. I'm the founder of A Green Legacy, which is an organization supporting and empowering underestimated cannabis entrepreneurs through programming, through community, and also through education. And I'm also a writer, so I'm a freelance writer for both Leafly and Weed Maps. And then I'm also a marketing and sales consultant. And so I do that primarily with cannabis companies. But my favorite job, I would say, is being a mom. So I am a mom to a 4-year-old boy. His name is Prosper. And I adore him. I adore him. But at the end of the day, y'all, being a mom, it can be it's a lot sometimes. It's a lot most of the time. And then being a mom who has so many other things going on, it's a lot. It's honestly a lot, even if there's not a million different things that you're doing all day. It doesn't matter if you are a working mom or a stay-at-home mom. Being a mom is whew, it is a job. It's a job, it's a duty, it's a job that you love, but also a job that sometimes you hate. And this month, with it being Valentine's Day and it also being the very beginning of the year, I've been doing a whole lot of thinking, reading, lots of more therapy work in the avenue of the concept of like being a super mom. I actually really hate the super mom, like, let's use this term as a compliment when really all you're saying is that moms just do everything, or we're expected to do everything. And that is actually where we are in society to some extent. And so what I was thinking about today is there's a few things that I want to tell you all about first around this concept, but I would like for this to be a very open discussion where you all come on up and chat with us around what does being not a super mom, but a super mom look like for you? What are things that you know that you do very uh well for your self health? I know that being a super mom requires us to take care of ourselves. So what are some of the things that you do in that way? And then what is one area that you would like to improve upon this year? And one thing that I'm going to need from you all is if you have a thing or a way that you have found to that helps you through something that another mom may be struggling with or has said that she's struggling with, then I want you to jump in and tell us what that thing is. What's something that helps you? And so a couple of things that I've been reading over the past week, I'm going to look to the side for a second, is there's an article in the New York Times, and it's called uh, this article was written in 2021, but it's called It's 2021, Why is Super Mom Still Around? And it's talking about how females are described as people who are, or the super mom is described as people who are both a career woman and a housewife whose to-do list spans cooking, cleaning, parenting, and earning a substantial paycheck. But it also is talking about how that's not doing families any favors. And I think as women, we all know that that is the case. And there should be no expectation that we're supposed to do it all, because we're not. And funny enough, one of the quotes from this article says, Supermom is just another way of saying women do it all, men don't do very much, which is what actually I was getting from it too. And so that's one piece. But then another piece that I've been reading quite a bit is this book called We Should All Be Millionaires. And it's really focused on a woman who's also, she was a lawyer. She's also now an entrepreneur as well. And she had this chapter that's called $1 Million Boundaries. And she tells a story about how she has 4 kids of her own. She also has a husband at home. And she was saying that one of the things that she really wanted once her career really, really kicked off was to have her own office space. And she was saying that one thing that she was struggling with very intensely was mom guilt. And she was struggling with the fact that her kids were wanting her attention, but she's the primary breadwinner. She's trying to do all of these things. And so she had to make a point to have boundaries even with her kids. Even when her kids are coming in to say, "Hey, mommy, I want to play with you right now," or "I want to do this with you right now," and she's working or focused on something, then she has to tell them, "Well, mommy is doing this right now, but later we can do this," and giving them a time to re-enter that conversation, to re-enter them engaging with each other. And so what I really loved about that chapter of her book was the piece of, I think oftentimes for myself, and maybe you all experience some of these things too, um that mom guilt and that mom shame happens so regularly. And for me, that's one thing that I still struggle with is mom guilt and mom shame, and that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm doing all of these things, but here's my son who's coming in and giving me a hug and being like, "Hey, can we play this?" But I know I still have another 15 minutes that I need to work over here. And so I will drop everything and I'll end up going, and spending 15, 20 minutes with him. And then when I get back to being able to do the thing that I was working on, usually I'm extremely tired. Usually I've lost my train of thought and I've lost my flow. So I need to get it all back, and then it takes longer. But I've really been trying to test out this year, giving a kind of 15-minute time frame and being like, "Hey, I can't play with you right now, but in 15 minutes when this timer goes off, then we can do something together." And so I'll hand the timer off to him and he'll go about his day. But that still doesn't stop the fact that I feel really guilty. And so that's one of my big struggles right now. But another thing that but a thing that I actually feel good about is that I do feel like I still maintain friendships and things that I enjoy doing outside of parenting. And so, what I would like to know, I would like for you all to come up to the stage, and I would like for you to tell us your name, who you are, tell us how old your child is or your children are, and tell us one thing that you both um, feel like you're really good at and you've mastered and you're very proud of mastering that thing. And then also tell us about something that you're struggling with. And again, if someone else in our audience has a way that they have um, thought through the challenge that another person is having, please tell us what that is. Let's talk about it. There's no shame here. We're all trying our best. So do come up onto the stage. You can also talk in the chat. I see that Sam has said, "This is so hard while working from home." Oh my gosh, working from home and the pandemic, oh, has been so hard. Hey, Takesha, how are you?
Hi.
I see that you said you have to get real with your kids. Tell me about it. Teach
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, my oldest is 19, it's about to be 20, and my youngest is 10, right?
Okay.
So I have three, two boys and one girl. And yeah, I remember you said your son is 4. I remember that time with my oldest. And yeah, I had that mom guilt um at one point, and it still comes and goes.
Yeah.
But then I really have to check myself, and I had this address my children, well, really my youngest. And you know I had to tell him that the reality is that I'm not here to entertain you. You know, I'm
Yes.
here to teach you how to adult, okay?
Yes.
Guide you into that and teach you how to adult so that you can be a productive and a happy and fulfilled human being. You know,
Yes.
you have the opportunity as a child to do what children do, and that's explore. So take this time, use your imagination, and do that. But I have to do the things that are required for adults because that's how society is set up. And I felt like, I had to tell him, we watch National Geographic. Often you don't see the mom or the nurturer doing the playing, play with the
Yes.
siblings. So, but for him, he doesn't have any yet. So it's like you have to fill in that space.
Yeah.
But yeah, set the time. But be realistic and real about what's going to be required.
I
So
love it.
that
I
that was that was it.
I love that. I love that. And let me ask you this. So, you've been in the mom game for a minute now.
Yeah,
So, what's when you look back on that, even when you look at where you are now, because you still have young one at home,
yes.
what what is the area where you're like, this is where I excel with my bound, this is where I excel, I've always been strong in this
Mhm.
way, and maybe that's in response to something that you experienced within your childhood. What does that look like for you?
Okay, so I think that what happened, I had a pretty rough childhood and I was the
Mhm.
only child. So for them to have siblings, you guys are blessed. You know,
Yes.
you guys are blessed. So I was always vying for my parents' attention, but there was some things going on, so I didn't get
Yeah.
it. Um, and I found myself at one point, I reached my 40s, and I found myself at one point like trying to out mother my mom, like I'm gonna do
Yes.
things differently. And then I look at how my children, especially my oldest, is, and it kind of shaped him in a way that I'm like, I think me going through a little something kind of gave me a different perspective on the world. Now,
Yes.
yeah, I still have all the children home. Yeah, he's 19, but and I'm like, when I was your age, I was gone. Like, what's happening here? So, but what I think I excelled at with them was just being completely transparent.
Mhm.
You know, that's where I excel is being they can trust for me to be open and honest about the realities of their situation.
Yeah.
And that's because I had no choice but to see what the world really was, you know.
Yes.
And so I don't want them to, even though you have it a little bit better than I did, let's be clear. That's why I love what Shaq said to his children, like,
Mhm.
yeah, I'm rich, not us. Not you guys got to get out there and do the work. And
Yes,
so
yes.
I think that's the part that, I excelled at. And then, I still have my areas, like you said, the most probably where I feel like I can work is the attention. I always want to be aware of not being borderline neglectful. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because I'm
Mhm.
so driven on, trying to excel at my self-care that
Yeah.
that I forget that they need some.
You you know what, Takesha? So a variety of things that you said, I was like, yes, I relate to this here. I do. And one thing that you were talking about is that, you find yourself trying to out mother your mother,
Mhm.
and you think, and you also realize that some of the trials that you had to experience, which, caused you to have to grow up and realize these things,
Right,
those were things that also allowed you to be independent in a way,
right.
into those sorts of pieces. And I think I feel very similarly in that
Mhm.
piece around, um I feel like my own childhood growing up was one where I had to be, more mature. I
Right.
had to be more independent. And
Yes.
so it was, and when I think about like even my nieces and nephews who luckily have not had to have that same kind of upbringing, and I look at
Yeah.
how my sisters have raised them, I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like you all truly get to be a kid while
Yes.
you're a kid, and
Yes.
that's beautiful. But then I look at them as now they're adults, most of them, and I'm like, hold on, why don't you know how to do X, Y, and Z? Like I knew how to do these things.
Right.
But but then I realized, like, no, actually, these things are probably what a kid who's not having to go through a bunch of drama or trauma or
Yes.
whatever it is, there
Yes.
this is can be typical.
Yeah.
Um, and so I it's sometimes that place where it's almost like a learning journey, like, what
Yeah.
can parenting look like?
Yes.
And I love the fact that you have prioritized your own self-care because, I mean, at the end of the day, how can we be, like, let's say super mom, not super
Mhm.
mom, but super mom, if
Mhm.
we don't have anything left on our plate?
Right.
So I applaud you for maintaining your own self-care, your
Mhm.
own um sense of, okay, I know that I need this in order to do this. And I
Yes.
think that that's a really great thing. And the fact that your son is at home, that must mean that you have not been neglecting. So
Right. It's like, are you going or what? Um,
Let I'm prepared for mine. I'm like,
yes.
I
Yes.
wish
It's good.
that uh it would have been wonderful to be like, okay, well, it's great that I know that if I want to stay at home for this time, because 19-year-olds are still kids, really. I mean, they're
Right.
adults by law,
By
but
law, but let's be clear that if, like you
yeah,
said, if you're not forced to have to be mature, you still are able to be childlike. And,
yes,
he's still a teenager. He still has his, he's finding his way, he's feeling his independence. And,
yes,
for me, I had to be independent much earlier.
yep,
It's like, yeah, I'm running around at 19 like I'm 30, but at the
yep,
end of the day, he can still be youthful and say, "Hey, I'm not ready to whatever." And the
yes,
one thing that I feel like I made clear to them as well is that mom is a role. It is not my identity, you know. And I'm still Takesha. I still have my, the things that existed before I had you, before you were here. I did have
yes,
a life,
yes,
so now I took the time um, to build a life with you in it. But one thing a friend of mine said that her mom taught her is when she had the child, everybody's, oh, the baby, be quiet, don't wake the
yep,
baby up. And her mom said, no, the baby was born into your world, and so you have they have to adjust to it. It's
yes,
not, not that somebody's playing loud music or whatever, but you still should be able to move around and be normal
yes,
and let them
within your own space, and baby's gonna adjust regardless.
right, as long as it's not harmful to them. So,
Right.
mom is a role, just like daughter or wife or whatever
Yep.
it is that you chose. It's a choice. But, I'm a woman first because that
Mhm.
was my choice. And, and of course, obviously I'm black, so that
Yep.
wasn't a choice. But I had to, kind of help them understand that, and eventually that role phases out. Like this, what I'm explaining to the 19-year-old,
Yeah.
and and by law, you're able to be responsible for yourself in certain things. So it's not, I'm not mommying you anymore. So
Yes. I love that. I have a neighbor who's also one of my good friends, and she always tells her son, she'll be like, she says, "Mom is a title, not my name." And so hearing this other version of that same sentiment, I feel like it's so important.
yeah,
And that piece around I remember I have 3 sisters,
Mhm.
and, my mom, she primarily raised me in my younger childhood, and, well, throughout my life, but
Mhm.
she was especially involved then as we were growing up, and so when I think of my mom, when I think of my sisters, all of them, their lives all revolve around their kids.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, well, vacations aren't a thing because the kids have basketball or track practice or whatever. Or even when it came to friendships, especially when my sisters and even when my sisters and then my mom, when the kids were younger, it's like, I can't hang out with these friends so much because the kids have X, Y, and Z to do. And so just
Right.
everything revolved around the children. And
Mhm.
so one thing that I remember talking to my husband about when we were thinking about having our son was like, I do not want to be the type of mom where my entire life revolves around what they're doing. I still want to have my identity
Right.
as Brittany,
That's sweet.
and so trying to find not only that balance, but also trying to notice and trying to be aware of when things are kind of going off of that path. It feels so incredibly important,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's a continuous battle too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kim, come on up if you feel inclined. Kim
Right.
said,
Right.
I have a 7 and 11-year-old, and I converted my small walk-in closet into what my husband calls the Zen Den.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Candles, crystals, sage, pillows, electric blanket, air filter, purifier. This is where I vape, read,
Mhm.
meditate, and decompress. My family doesn't bother me much because they know I need some me time. I love that. I love that. Takesha, do you have a special spot?
Unfortunately, no. So the whole house is my spot, and this is, hey, when
Yes,
you have to, you can have your spot when you have your spot when it's time
yes,
for you but this is my spot, and throughout the whole space. Um I think that, I love children, that's why I had them. And because I wanted to, of course, I was, was an only child, so I wanted to, they are my, connection. But
yeah,
um, right, you create your own space when you get the space. But I think
yes,
that we become too wrapped up with, oh, I got to do all the things for them first,
yep,
in order to be seen as this super mom, you
yeah,
know, and in just attaching to those identities
yep,
and labels. And so what I learned how to do was detach from that. I kind of get rid of labels
yes,
and and strip down to just who I am, who am I, and what do I want, and what do I love. And when they see that, I think that's the most important thing for them to see, is
yes,
that it's
yes,
okay and you're allowed to do that. Even, what, I don't, even the constructs that we are given, and those beliefs that we're given from our parents, you can detach from that as you grow and explore and all of that. So, I feel like that's the best thing for them to see, me loving myself, you
yep,
know, regardless to what label I've been given or what, task I've taken on. Um,
yes,
and how perfectly I do it or imperfect or what have you,
yes,
but still loving myself beyond that, and but children, I love them because, unconditional love, comes from them. Like that's the on its highest level, you
isn't
know,
it?
they can see you, they see you, my
Yes,
children actually see me. And that was the best thing that I could give them was transparency and authenticity.
right.
and everything else you're gonna get when you get out there anyway. I mean, you can't you try to tell them something, they don't want to hear anything, so they
Right.
forget everything you said. And so even with cannabis, I'm open about my consumption. I
Yep.
teach them what it is, and why. And to them it's still mommy's thing. That's mommy's thing. Mommy's thing, but but it's they know that I wouldn't harm them or do anything
Yeah.
for myself. So, you know,
Yes.
they trust that.
I
And
love, I love, I love that. And Heather James, she said, children seeing a happy, rested mother is important, even if not every day.
that's right.
And Heather, that's such a good point. Even thinking about the fact that, it's not realistic that we're gonna always do it perfect. We're gonna always be 100%. And so being able to know though that mommy does have those moments. Hey, Kim.
Hi, Kim.
I
And that she is an individual herself. It's
Hmm.
it's so powerful. It really is. It really is. Heather, that's a great point.
Yes.
Kim, tell us about yourself. How old are yours?
so mine are 7 and 11. And
Okay.
so I've been struggling with that. I agree with every single and can relate to everything that both of you have said with the identity and the I'm not here to entertain you. Like that's why I had two of you go Paul. Like I love you, but no. Like I love you, but
Yes.
Right. Right.
so like the identity thing, and also I'm a military spouse, so that
Mm,
also adds like another layer of identity
Yes.
crisis because
yes.
the last 15, 16 years I've been a military spouse and been a mom for 11 of those years. So
Hmm.
moving every 3 years, and yeah, I've
Hmm.
struggled, and I've now that my kids have gotten a little bit older, I'm starting
Mhm.
to feel like I'm getting back to myself and really finding myself
Right.
again. And cannabis obviously helps so much, just opening up the mind and just helping with
Yes.
everything with my relationships with my marriage. And my
Hmm.
kids see me happier, I can laugh more because I'm relaxed and my anxiety is not through the roof. So there's
Yes.
so much, and I can relate to so much of that. And going back to the whole like why don't kids know how to do stuff nowadays, I think that might also be, I'm 41, but I think that might be a Gen X zennial, so I'm a zennial,
Uh,
right?
Hmm.
But I think it might be a Gen X thing too, right? So like latchkey kids, like we just, right?
yes.
I mean, I'm like, that's what we're like, there's people that don't, I mean, they don't drive until they're a little bit older, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like everybody
Wait,
that I
wait.
knew
I'm one of them. I'm
50,
one of them.
really? Oh no, but like
Yes.
it's like really common. No, I mean, but it's really a lot common. I'm like, oh my gosh,
I
like
grew
it's,
up in New York City, so it was like,
oh,
Okay.
that's
Okay.
different. Yeah. That makes sense. But you know what I'm saying? I'm like, oh, I get that's like normal. You know what I mean? That there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that choose not to drive now. But what I remember is people were chomping at the bit at 15 years old to get your
wow.
driver's permit and stuff. And
Yes.
but now with my kids, about a couple years ago, my daughter was all no, she was probably 10. It was about a year ago. I was like,
Mhm.
she was like, I want some eggs for breakfast. I'm like, it's about time you learn. And you know
Right.
what? She makes her eggs now. And I'm like,
That's right.
I
That's
be
You
like,
know,
right.
do it, just do it.
you're right. Well, it's so funny. So I have my oldest niece, her she's 20, she just turned 23. And I'm based in Seattle, but I'm from Tennessee. And so she just moved from Tennessee out to Seattle, and she's now a nurse here. And so in order for her to get adjusted, we were like, "Hey, you can come and live with us and for, a year, and then you're going to like
Right.
find your own wings." But it's so funny because she'll come home and she'll be like, "Ugh, adulting is so ghetto. I am just so stressed." And I'm like, "Hold on, first of all, you are living at our house." Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? And then she'll like tell this story, and I'm like, I'm I'm still not seeing it. I'm
Mm-mm.
trying to understand where the stress comes in. And I'm also like, girl, if this is stressing you out, just wait until you're for real on your own and you have like real bills and
Mhm.
you have real things that you have to maintain. And so I
Yeah.
agree with you. I do think it is that like maybe that Gen Z-ness, but also the fact that I was definitely a latchkey kid. I was that kid staying at home at 6 and my mom being like, don't turn on the stove.
Right.
She's having to work 3 jobs. So she
This
was
is
like,
fact.
don't turn on the stove. I got
Answer
food
the
on the
door.
counter. Don't you open the door. And when I'm calling, and don't answer the phone, but when I'm calling, the phone's gonna ring 3 times. I'm gonna hang up and then I'm gonna call back. So like there's this level of independence that I think our
But before
generation have.
be home before the lights go out off the street lights go out.
Yes,
Like, just
That's
be home by
right.
yes,
then. Bye. Like, go. Yeah, see ya. Like, in the
yes,
morning, just leave the house in the morning, come back before. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a whole
absolutely.
other, that's just a can of worms, right? I mean, we could talk all day about that kind of stuff, but it
Yeah.
is interesting to see how, how that is, how generate
Yeah.
from generation to generation, it's different. It's not that one's better than the other. It's just different. It's interesting to see like the psychology behind like this generation brought up this, generation that thinks this way. And yeah.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. One, and I'm very curious how that generation will approach parenting. And so it's like, I was just reading an article on LinkedIn that was talking about how Gen Zers want it all from their job. And when I was reading the article, I was like, first of all, they're not wanting it all. They just want to not feel demoralized every time they're going into their job. They're
Mhm.
just like requiring you all to treat them like humans while they're working for you. And so, do they want to work remote? Sure. But I really feel like there is a level of like, I think sometimes we look at it as like entitlement, but I'm not even sure if it's necessarily entitlement. It's like, no, I want to still be who I am. I still want to have like my mental health in the things that I'm doing, and I'm knowledgeable of that. And then there is still this focus on, I would say, like fairness and justice and those sorts of things. So I'm really curious as these Gen Zers begin to have children and begin to raise children and get to, our age, what will parenting have shifted? Will there be this shift that I guess we've seen throughout history where, at one point moms and women, you had to have a husband of some sort, a committed spouse, so that you could have a bank account, so that you could live, like it was an act of survival to have that. And then there was also this expectation that if you work outside of the house, you still have to do all of these things in the house. And then we have like, newer generations where it's like, okay, maybe like the 80s, 90s. Now we have this thought of women like wanting to have the kid, wanting to have the job, wanting to not even necessarily wanting to take care of the home per se, but society still having that
Mhm.
expectation. But you know, they but we as women we were demanding like respect. Like, yeah, we are doing these things, but you're going to respect me while I'm doing these things, and we are entitled to that, and we are. And so there's been these shifts in how we work outside of our homes, and also how we work inside of our homes. So, and that links to parenting as well. So I'm very curious as to what that will look like for this newer generation that's entering parenthood, and what we can learn from it, because that mommy guilt and the mommy shame and all of that. And I was just at my kids' school today doing this like learning and discovery parenting thing, and I was looking at the other parents and I was like, man, I don't feel like I'm this kind of mom. I don't feel like I'm the, cut up all of your grapes and 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 like fear that if I let you go outside and play in the front yard, that like, I don't know, the sun is going to cause you to get cancer. I don't know. Like I just
Right,
I don't feel
right.
like I'm that type of parent. I'm cool with those who are, but I just don't feel like I'm that kind. But I found myself trying kind of comparing myself like, oh man, I don't do that. I don't do that. And it's hard to usher that thought process out.
Mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
I'm very
Yes,
curious,
yes.
how has it been for you all?
Yes. I think I've noticed the changes with the generations, well, the new moms. Um, and I'm just seeing even the preparation before before the child arrives, like, and I'm saying young moms, these are not even women that you probably would want to be more prepared. But
Mhm.
even in that, they're doing the gender reveals, like, and all the things that you know, it was like, and then, they want not just the gender reveal and the baby shower, but then also the photos and all that. So
Yep.
it's like it's a different, I see where it's going with um, because once the baby arrives, right, and it gets real for them.
Absolutely.
Um, right.
Absolutely.
That's the question. How are you gonna help this shape this human being? You know,
Yes.
that's what and for they still need guidance. I think that we don't we get a coach for everything else under the sun, a business coach. Yeah, I'm a cannabis coach. You got
Yes.
a health coach and all that, but we think there's no need for parenting coaching, you know. We think there's no need for moms to help coach other moms and really
Yes.
um, women who have been through the experience just to help you navigate um that space, or
Yes.
that role. And really, like you said, balancing all of the things now that before prior generations didn't have to balance. You were just a stay-at-home mom, like you didn't have an
Yes.
option. Then women, thank goodness, said, "Listen, enough
Thank
is enough.
goodness.
I'm a human being, and I have dreams and aspirations. I'm not just here to
Yes.
raise the children." So now we have the women's movement, and we move into being able to go to work, but we still want to have children. We still want that part. And
Yeah.
so you find that, like, oh, but I think even COVID happening and a lot of moms having to stay home over their husband, or their partner, or even if there was a single mom, it's just like now you have to stay home and you're home with your children, and it's just like, you know.
Yes.
So the and
Yeah.
this is and you're like, this is it, you start this is it? Wait, no, this was not us. We're the ones that said we want, you know. And so now we're out, and now the ones that are younger, you have the ones that are saying, "No, I'm doing this first." Like my daughter let me know, "I'm not having any children," and I was heartbroken. I was just like, because you're my only daughter. I thought she wanted to go through the experience of a
Yeah.
woman goes through, and she's like, "Nah," you
That's not
know.
for me.
I'm doing me, and I had to really, respect that. And
Yeah.
she's 15,
Yeah.
so but then I have, cousins that, they have children and, they're going through it, but, just like dad, I wish, I would have waited so I could fulfill some things first. Uh,
Yes.
because
Yes.
it totally takes you to a whole different direction. Albeit it's a lovely journey, of
Yeah.
self-reflection, because your children can teach you about yourself, really.
That
And
they whew,
and all the work that you need to do for yourself. And
whew,
so that's what they hear, and I'm grateful for that. But
I
yeah,
love that.
it's gonna be a different journey for them, and all we
I
can
do
do
too.
is just be here and be available for them to come to as coaches and say, "Here, here's a space for you to come to." That has to be
Yes. Well, and you know what Heather said, that choice was something a lot of us didn't take seriously, but parenthood isn't for everyone.
That's
And
right.
that is so on it. Like everybody don't want to be a parent, and everybody doesn't have to be. And
Right.
so it is one of those things. I love the idea, Takesha, of having like mommy mentorship.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
we have
Yes.
mentors, we have the coaches, like you said, for everything else. I think that is, I love that idea.
Yes.
Like
We need
you
it.
have this person, because there's some of us who maybe we only saw the way that our parents did it. Some of us weren't able to see how our parents did it at all. They had some alternative situation. And
Right.
so it's like, where do you go when you're now taking on this journey, and there's not as many resources out there outside of like looking around on the internet, the Googles, to get
Hmm.
us through it. Now, what I did notice, ladies, is that it is now 4:53 my time PST, but our session was supposed to end 3 minutes ago. This
Okay.
was such a great conversation. Takesha, Kim, it was so good talking to you. Heather, it was so nice hearing from you all. I think we're back at the main stage.
Okay.
And hey, all I know is that you all are super moms.
Thank
So
you.
go forth and
So are
continue
you.
being your amazing self.
Thank you.